Perennial beds, super important, and actually could be transferred to most land use systems. Agroforestry is a huge one when we talk about climate change mitigation, and it should actually be a little bit more present in our political discussions. In Germany we have started the DEFAF, which is the German Agroforestry, not foundation, but association, and would be worth to support their work and actually tell politicians that trees and cropland or pasture could be thought together, and there are a lot of mutual benefits there. But somehow in Germany, like, we separate forest and agricultural land very clearly. We talk quickly about these amazing little fields that are different from the cultivation beds, up to 3 different successions per year. And these buggers here are our perennial plants, or our soon-to-be little agroforestry systems. So we have planted bushes, shrubs, Aromapflanzen und Stauden, like herbal species, and a lot of perennials, basically to provide habitat. Because here we reset the ecosystem up to 3 times a year, at least above ground. We do not plow and we leave roots in ground, so the underground ecosystem can mature to allow for the regulatory functions of the ecosystem to take place. We talk about predator-prey relations. Because we do not spray pesticides, we do need somebody who eats our pests, because pests do occur. And like you see the little butterflies, they will do eat our cabbage, but if we invite a hunter, like for example a wasp spider, Wespenspinne, we do give it a chance to be in an equilibrium. We do lose crops to pests, but the question is always about giving and taking. Nature takes some, we take some. It's also increasing surface area. We do go in the 3rd dimension. That means we do have more photosynthetic plant matter, but we also have more surface, for example, morning dew and moist air to condensate. So we can harvest fog. And then we are not so dependent on rain. And it weaves nicely into the 3rd big advantage, which is microclimate. They do break wind. They give us 2 different shade sides, morning and evening sun. And that allows for another complexity to take into account when you do crop planning. And of course you can harvest. We have a lot of herb specialities and fruits and berries that also provide economic yield. This is now in its 2nd year. Yeah, everything here is baby. When we came, this was just freshly plowed. The couch grass was very happy about it. Beds that have been in no-till system longer are more healthy than the ones we've just established. It's now in the 4th year. We do see a lot of fungal activity. We have not added mycorrhizal actively apart from in the perennial beds. And I mean, we do expect positive effects on plant health. We now know that mycorrhizal fungi are quite important for the secondary and tertiary plant metabolites. We do direct seed, like for rocket and salad mixes and carrots, but we do plant most of our crops. So we grow them in trays and then we plant from the tray. And sometimes in bed preparation we do use a tilther, which is a little rototiller. But only for the first 2 to 3 centimeters, which is not turning the soil but more turning the mulch. We don't do polycropping here. Our polycropping is within the rows, so you will see that there are very different things in between the rows, like no bed is the same. The polyculture here is within the interchanging of the beds. We have very little beds where we do polycultural planting because it's super difficult to harvest and super difficult to predict how much you harvest, and it's difficult to standardize and economically make it work. But you still have the possibility for root interaction, and you still have benefits in the overarching ecosystem. In such a complex system where we harvest so much, we try to keep our crop rotation. At the moment it's, I think, 5 different rotations. We have like our crops grouped in general families and we do rotate them. Right. But the management is adaptive.
Yes.
Sometimes you lose a bed to snails and then you plant something else because it just has a very short window, and then maybe we put radishes in. and sometimes stuff just doesn't want to be there. Like we had a big problem with potato beetles and the aubergines were next to it. So this year the aubergines have been ventured to the very other end and we're not doing potatoes anymore. Right. Even though we had some varieties that thrived even with the potato beetle. And those were also the ones we selected to replant again. But then the day only has 24 hours and we had a lot of changes in the team and we had to tackle some other general topics and concerns, and things became different than planned. And how we choose what to grow: diversity, 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 and stuff that is ideally suited for our climate. We have a very short growing period. From May to November are our main harvest times, and we have very little sheltered growing surface, which goes with the context of the garden team that they want to work with the sunlight hours heavily in summer and then go into hibernation over winter and maybe go to the Maldives or somewhere where it's nice and different and have 3 months off or 2 months off. Not very nice for our sales. We need to be quite creative in what we do in the meantime. The preserves are one attempt to make that work. Yeah. And obviously meats and eggs are still running. I quickly want to direct the attention to the nursery, which is part of this internalizing approach of value chains that I mentioned earlier. And having the nursery or the plant nursery on site comes with, who would have thought, 3 very interesting advantages. The first one is diversity. And choosing crops where we can't buy the young plants, but we can buy the seeds. Because we know shitloads of people who do awesome work and we can buy the seeds. And we can choose colleagues in similar climate zones that do amazing work and grow their plants here. We do preserve seeds from cultures that are very easy, but if you see all the diversity and you know a little bit about seed production, you will know that it will be super difficult to produce quality seed on most plants because they depend on pollination. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of cross-pollination here. We do preserve seeds from some tomatoes. We have preserved seeds of forest strawberries, which are actually super delicious. And but we do not grow our own seed. But we could establish systems that could probably allow for it, because most of our seeds are seed hardy and not hybridized. Yeah. There are exceptions, but we do work with a very high focus on heritage breeds. So if it would be needed, we could change the system and probably reproduce our own seed. Yeah. And luckily Alba also knows roughly how to do that. Yeah. But for a production garden in this scale it would not be possible here. We can also maintain quality from the very first cotton leaf that's coming out and check on plant health quite regularly. If we buy a young plant, we can only hope that it's good quality, and very often it's not. Which goes hand in hand with the third reason, which I find quite interesting and is also a nice one to move to the cowies. Plants are stationary beings. They do not have legs and walk around. And if you transport a stationary being, you have a risk of changing its environment to a stressy one. And a stressed organism, once again, doesn't perform. It's not as healthy, it's more susceptible to pests, and in the end doesn't taste as good. It's not as important with our annual vegetables, if I'm honest, because we eat them very young. But it is quite important when we look at trees, for example. Stationary beings adapt themselves to their environment, and they kind of harden their stem with the running of the sun. They adjust to soil conditions, they root, and if you take them out and you move them somewhere else, also stuff like electromagnetic fields, they change. And plants are way more susceptible or way more sensitive to that than we are. We can transport plants, but we'd like to minimize that here. Different story with the animals, because there are legs, and they are there for very good reasons, to move.